Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Addiction. You know, I'm always excited to do a show and I love all the guests that come on. But today I really love the guest that's coming on because my good friend Erika Barney, who I've known since 2020, which we first met, as we've become friends, we've started learning that we have a lot in common. And we were just speaking about a week or 2 weeks ago, and she reached out and says, I think it's time I come on. And of course, I didn't hesitate. I'm like, yeah, let's schedule it right now. So today we're going to be talking about healing comes with understanding addiction and learning forgiveness. So before I introduce Erika, I want you to know a little bit more about her. Erika is a true leader, a woman who loves helping others feel confident inside and inspiring them to truly live their best life. And I can ditto on that. She is a mom, a grandma, wife, and she's married to her soulmate Mark, and a lover of all things bling. And if you guys think she just loves going out and buying bling, no, she sells bling. So if you guys are looking for bling, get a hold of her. She loves people. She is always sharing smiles and hugs, especially with strangers and people who need a little more love. And I tell you what, everyone can use a little more love today. She believes in honoring your heart and your boundaries while healing wounds and misunderstanding and hurt feelings, then learning from these experiences and moving forward to forgive. Everything that she put down in that bio, like I said, her and I have a lot in common. And that's how I try to live my life every day as well. So without further ado, I would like to introduce my lovely friend, Erika Barney. Erika, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Gosh, I was going back before the show, and I was making some notes as I do usually, and I started going back and thinking, gosh, 2020, when I showed up at that event, and I remember you said, here comes this. I look at this guy comes walking in with Levi's and flip flops on, and I'm like, yeah, that was me. You're like, I've never seen that before. But anyway,
No,
we got talking and we have just become really good friends. And you've been a huge supporter of the other side of addiction. You came to our second Healing Utah Success Summit, which saying thank you from me and also thank you from the rest of the people that are on the committee, because your presence, we loved your presence. We felt your kindness and your love, and we just want to say thank you for that.
you're welcome. Thank you for the invitation. I don't think we wouldn't be having this conversation. We wouldn't be daring to share my story had I not come to that event.
Yeah, right. Because you said that really opened you up, right? It
Yeah.
kind of got you really thinking on some things, and that is what's so cool about being able to do something like this. When we did our very first one in St. George last August, that weekend is what changed my wife's thinking. And that's when she said, I don't want to do accounts payable anymore. I want to be a certified peer support specialist. So I'm over here with freaking goosebumps. It's so cool to know that our event is touching people's lives in that way, because that was the whole purpose of doing it.
Yep. Well, if I wasn't celebrating my anniversary, I'd be at the one in October. So we'll see what happens, and I may just show up for the afternoon again.
All right. All right. Well, I wouldn't condone it, but start a fight with Mark and just tell him you have to leave it for a while. No, I'm just kidding. Don't do that, especially on your anniversary.
I'm
So
actually the one that suggested um, we have two dates that are super important to us. The first one I can remember, no problem. But the second one is still kind of new. This will be the third year of remembering to remember that day.
okay.
And this year I have a friend who's just been begging us to do couples photos and then to revamp my brand. And something that we may or may not talk about today. You know the aha that I had at the Healing Summit this last couple of months, but we're moving forward with that idea. And so my friend's moving to Tennessee like 2 weeks after my photo shoot. And so she's like, I only have this day. And I was like, dang it, I was going to move my anniversary day celebration to another day so I could come and celebrate with you guys and be a part of it again. But the only day she has, Al, is the 7th. So I was like, okay, let's hurry. Let's start at like 8 o'clock in the morning so that I can go surprise my friends. So we'll see what happens. But I've already told her, I'm like, I want to be in 3 places at once.
There you go.
So let's make sure it happens. So yeah, I'm the one that put it on the calendar, but then was hoping for the weekend before, but there's no way. People just want her before she moves. And
Yeah.
so we'll see what happens.
Okay. Well, either way, we appreciate you. It's yeah. So we'll kind of let it go from there. So reading your bio, I mean, you nailed your bio, right? I know that you love giving hugs out. You love helping people. It's a huge thing for both of us, and I think that's why you and I look eye to eye in a lot of different things, right? Or a lot of, not different things, but in a lot of things in general. You know, you've seen me. We met when I was kind of like really going through a lot in my life at the time, and you had just kind of starting out, and you've shared a little bit with me. And why is it so important? What do you mean by healing comes with understanding? And I'm pretty sure you know, I know where you're going with this, because I've had to do the same thing. But I'd like to start out there just to kind of see where it goes, because I have a strong feeling I'm going to end up on the same lane that you're in.
Okay. So for me, I was a really good welcome mat, and I was really a great safe place to land in regards to my son. And just so that the viewers kind of have a little bit of a background, we started addiction recovery when my husband, who's been in law enforcement, found drugs in our son's bedroom at 15. And I prayed a whole nother prayer, Al, because I was like, this is not the road we're going to go down. I was completely thinking that our son was in a different path of life. And so, of course, when my husband came upstairs and was like, I just found marijuana in our son's bedroom, I was like, nope, it must be a friend's. It must be someone else's. It's not Riley's. And over the course of the next couple of weeks, it clearly was not a friend's. And I didn't know then how much my son was hurting. And for our son, it was losing the man he called his dad. And then 30 days later, within 30 days, his best friend committed suicide. He was a wheelchair bound individual and rolled himself into the Jordan River. So I didn't know any of those things, Al, until many years later. In and out of recovery center, in and out of addiction, in and out of homelessness. The list goes on and on for our son. And it was celebrating his 21st birthday. And I mean, you and I have talked. I've listened to some of the episodes here on The Other Side of Addiction. Being a part of the Healing Summit really opened my eyes to say, this is a pattern. This is a roller coaster. And it was in that time that I realized I had to ask myself the question, am I my son's victim? Instead of being the safe place to land, or, the mom who had endless amounts of love for him and made every excuse every time he relapsed, I had a reason why he relapsed outside of, really digging deep and looking at the truth. But I had to start to hold myself accountable for what I was expecting my son to do. I'm an imperfect perfectionist, Al, and I'm a recovering control freak. And I realized that that's kind of my addiction. I love, if I can't do it perfect, I don't generally start it. And if I can't control it, I generally don't give my opinion. So those were two big ahas for me in, kind of what I talked about in my bio of, I had to start with forgiving myself, understanding that I couldn't control my son's outcome. I couldn't make him sober forever. I couldn't I couldn't love him enough to keep him sober. And so that's kind of where my journey began, to starting to share my story and to kind of uncover my own forgiveness for myself, not being able to do all the things as a parent we want to do, but also to forgive him for being himself, understanding that relapse is a part of recovery. It sucks as a parent to be a part of that, but it's something that has to happen in order to get, down the road. And so that's kind of where it began for me.
Wow. And to touch base on a few things, we're huge supporters of like the Red Barn, the Other Side Academy. Love their program, love their concept. And that is one thing that they disagree on, right? And I'm not knocking what you're saying, okay? So please don't think that I am. 'Cause we all have our own opinion and our own look of how things look to us, right?
Yep.
They definitely don't believe that relapse is part of it. They disagree
Mm.
with it, right? Um, they believe some, not all, some rehabs, they use that, and that gives that individual that excuse now, right? Because they're like, oh, well, they said I'm probably going to relapse, so I'm going to relapse, right? And I also understand where you're at on that as well too, because I watched my wife relapse over and over and over, and not realizing how much harm I was doing to her. And also, I guess I can't say, because I thought I was, and now I look at it differently. I felt like I was pushing her to relapse. It was still her choice, though, right? Now,
Right.
I may have been adding things to whatever she was going through, not realizing I was doing it, because all we want to do as a loved one is help, right? That's all you were doing for your son. I mean, I love that you put, am I my son? I think this is how you put it. Am I my son's victim, right? Isn't that how you put it?
Yes.
And I had that thrown at me many, many times, when Janan would relapse, and she would basically throw it on me. I was the problem why she was relapsing. It took me so long to realize that's the addict's way of thinking, because that's how they justify them to relapse and go back to drinking or using again. The real hard one is what you said with the forgiveness. Now, it's a whole different ballpark you're playing in compared to mine. Yours is your son. Mine's my spouse. I can, just say screw this and go leave that stadium and go to another ballpark to go play. But when it's your child, that's totally different, because you you gave this human being life, right? And you did everything you could. And I'm sure, and I've had a few people tell me this who have had a child, they blame themselves for years of being a bad parent and making all these mistakes. Well, for those of you that are listening to this, if that's what you're thinking, do your best not to think that way, because not all of us, there ain't a one of us who's a perfect parent. We've all messed up. There is no manual. They didn't teach us in school. We didn't go to a parenting class before we decided to have kids. We do what we know best. We take things that our parents taught us. Some things we may hang on to, some things we may get rid of. Hell, we may even just throw the whole book away and rewrite a whole new one ourselves. So that forgiveness is tough, right? I mean, I still struggle with it at times, even with all the work I've put into it. Do you find yourself in that same situation?
Um, up until a couple of months ago, I wasn't a fan of meditating. Um, I called it everything else but meditating. I was like, that is not for me. But I will tell you that some of the biggest ahas, but the biggest moments of healing and moments of allowing forgiveness have been committing to, I mean, you know me, Alec, I'm a go, go, go. Like, if there's not 26 hours in a day, like, how does Erika get everything done? But I made a commitment a few months ago to myself when I set my goals for the rest of the year that I wasn't going to call it meditating. I was just going to call it stillness. And I was going to give myself 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes at night. But if it ran over and I was still in that moment of quiet, it was okay. I wasn't going to beat myself up over it. And that stillness has very much become healing, not only to myself, but it allows me to brainstorm and journal ideas so that, when I get that weekly phone call, right now, my son is currently in a new recovery program and we only talk once a week. Part of it is my boundary so that I can get everything done, but still be present for the rest of my family, but really gives him accountability to know he's got to do this for himself. I'm still your ride or die. I'm still your, number one supporter. But I think the thing that wasn't there before, Al, that is now, or at least starting, is accountability to himself. He knows that I'm going to be there for him. And he knows there's a bridge to be mended in regards to my husband and possibly some of my other children. But he also knows that we kind of started over on ground zero, 3 weeks ago when he started this new program. And so in the stillness of those 15 minutes, it is definitely a forgiveness talk with myself, because I didn't go to parenting class. I wanted to. I used to tease my mom before I had children. I was like, I need to go to parenting class. What if I'm not as great as you? And she would say, I don't want you to be me. I want you to be you. And if you mess up, that's what I'm there for. Let's have the phone call and let's talk about it. And so those stillness moments are the reality of, I'm a mom and it's okay that I'm going through this. Because I think for a lot of people, I know that when you and I talked prior to the summit, I've said for years, I don't have an addiction. How can I possibly relate to my son because I don't have an addiction? And yet perfectionism and control is a reality check for me on a daily basis of, it is my, in ways it's my comfort zone.
Yeah.
Because it is who I am, but it can be an addiction if I let it. And
Yeah.
so realization of that for me has helped me to be accountable to myself, but to be there even more for my son as we, enter this old journey, but new journey, because, every program's different.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really is, right? And you hope that one of them is going to be that one. However, really, again, all of them could be that one. It just depends where they are at up here, right? Are they ready? Because I'm really now understanding a little bit more of that. Of, you said it at the beginning of the show, it doesn't matter what we do to push, doesn't matter what we say to them, our hands are flipping tight. And
Yeah.
really, it's their choice, it's their decision. And are they ready or are they not? Because the first 4 recovery centers that Janan went to, she did it because of me. Totally wrong reason to be going into it. But she did it because me, as the husband, was thumping her on the head constantly, going, you need to go, you need to go, you need to go. And so she would finally go. Well, of course she's not going to succeed, right? Because she doesn't want to be there, because she's not ready.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's Yeah, and they do say, sometimes it can take up to 7 to 12 different rehabs before they're ready. And I don't know. I'm still kind of weighing that one out. I don't know if that's one I agree or disagree with as of yet, because I've had other guests that have come on the show that just said, when I said I was done, I was done. That was it. And it was one and done, right? They went into their very first one and I'm good. And now they still work the program. I'm not saying they've wiped their hands clean of it. They still
Right.
work the program. They just knew it was that time.
Yep. And like you said, it's a decision.
Yeah.
I can want for my son every day, all day, every day. But until he, like you said, until he thumps himself on the head and decides that he's done. For him, it's been a wide array of substance abuse. It started something as simple as marijuana, and currently it's crystal meth and who knows what else.
Yeah.
And and when 3 days after he turned 22, I got a phone call from the hospital. He had been in jail for 6 months, sober by definition, dried out, and he was he had appeared in court. Judge ordered him to a new program, let him out on his own recognizance to go check into that program, and found a buddy on the way to rehab, and they decided to just go hang out. And that led to Riley overdosing. And I got a phone call from the hospital 3 days after his birthday, and your feelings are already on a level of hashtag anxiousness, hashtag, all the things, because it's another year, that he's made it. And it was a decision, Al, where I had to honor my own boundaries. When the therapist called and said, we found your son, he's been ambulanced to this hospital, and we're gonna keep him overnight. We were able to revive him, all those things. Do you want the address to the hospital? Well, to a lot of people, this is going to sound really hard. But in that moment, I found myself having that spiritual moment with God to say, what do I do? And I felt ever so strongly to say no. And it was the first time in 7 years I didn't run to the hospital. I didn't run to the recovery program. I didn't run to jail. I didn't run anywhere. I sat on my couch and I cried. And then I called my husband and I said, I got a phone call, and I know you've been through the same scenario, maybe differently, but I had to have that moment where I was like, am I glad or am I mad? Because as a parent, I don't know if anyone's ever experienced this, but sometimes you almost wish that God would take them.
Yeah.
Because you get so tired and hurt and all the things, because they just keep doing it to themselves. And you want more than anything for them to have a better life. But again, as we've been discussing today, they have to decide. And so in that moment, I had to have a talk with God and be like, okay, am I mad that he didn't, successfully become pain-free in that moment, whatever pain looked like for him? Or am I glad because I get another day with my child, as anxious as that may feel in this moment? And so when I told the therapist no, they knew me, they know me as the ride or die. They're like, oh, Erika will be here, however quickly she can get in her car and go. And I didn't go. And she was shocked. She was like, well, what do you want me to do? And I said, well, I think you have a taxi pass. When you feel like it's safe for him to be discharged, will you please give him one of those and make sure that he gets to said recovery center? She goes, so you're not coming at all? And I said, no, I'm not. Keep me informed if you feel, you need to do so, but I'm going to honor myself today. And again, as we've been discussing, it was another one of those moments of healing to be able to be there.
Yeah. You set your boundaries, right? You
Barely.
barely, and you hear that in the recovery community, right? Triggers, boundaries. It took me a long time to realize the boundaries had to do with me as well, right? Being on the other side. It's just not the person that's going through the addiction. It's everyone that's involved with the addiction that we have to set it. Now, the trick is to follow through as hard as it is, right? I mean, it's tough. And I have thought, and again, people can say what they want to say, but I have thought the same thing. And it scares the living crap out of me, in all honesty, right? Because I had a scare about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and it scared me so bad. Literally, I was at work and I was shaking. There's not a lot of things that get me shaken, but that got me shaken. And I was telling my coworker, I says, have you ever seen like those exorcist movies? I says, this is what I feel like's happening to me right now. It's like I'm getting slammed against that wall, and then I'm getting slammed against that wall, and I'm getting slammed to the ceiling, and then my feet are back on the ground, and I get a few steps, think I'm going to escape, and I get slammed against the wall again. And with you being a parent, I want to, if anyone's looking at Erika in a different way, I hope you don't, because I want to share this with what she just said. My wife was in recovery. Her mom was in an assisted living, and her health was starting to diminish pretty quickly. And I would do my best to go check in on her. So when I did talk with Janan, I could give her a little update on her mom. And I remember going in one day and she asked me how she was. And I told her what had been going on and that she just went into recovery again. And this floored me when she said it. She goes, maybe it would be better if the addiction just took her life. Yeah. And that's her talking about her daughter. And she's lived it, right? She had a husband that battled addiction. So she knew those emotions. But for her to say that as a mom, it literally floored me. However, umpteen years later, I understand why she said it. I get it. We really don't want it to happen, and it scares the living crap out of us. But also, in a way, I think, at least for me, I would feel like, okay, they're at peace now, right? They're at peace. And also, in a selfish way, I'm at peace, because now I don't ever have to worry if I'm going to get that phone call. Now I don't ever have to worry, to get a call from the jail, or now I don't have to worry about this or that. And that's hard to swallow. It really is hard to swallow. However, there is a little bit of comfort into it, if that makes sense.
Oh, it absolutely does. It's not a thought you ever want to have. You had mentioned your mother-in-law. For so many years of my son's recovery story, and journey, I too had my mom. My mom was my biggest supporter in this. It was, she was the person I could call day or night when I got I have the phone number to the jail memorized. So I just know. And there have definitely been those days, Al, where you get the phone call from the jail and the only thought you can think is, at least he's safe.
Right.
At least he's warm. At least he's going to eat tonight. Because for so many years of Riley's story and so many years of my journey in the recovery journey, you wonder, because sometimes they choose homelessness. And I remember having a conversation with my mom years ago, and I'm like, that story, the thought you brought up of, do you think you're a good parent? And I had that conversation with my mom one day, and I was like, Mom, what's wrong with me? I love him so much. why would he not want to live at home instead of on the street or in a halfway house? And what she said to me still rings true today as we are still going through this road. Is she said, Erika, it's not how much you love him, it's how much he loves himself. And I think sometimes in the addiction recovery road, even individuals in life, I know that I've questioned, how much do I love myself? How much confidence do I have? All the questions that you ask just as a daughter or son of life.
Yeah.
But in that moment, she said, it's not anything that you're doing wrong. He knows you love him. But until he figures out how much he loves himself, this road will continue. And as you know, I lost my mom 3 years ago this week. And there have been times where I have had yelling matches to heaven because you have another relapse happen, or you have another situation within his recovery happen. And I don't get those phone calls anymore. But I can reminisce on the phone calls I have had to say, okay, what would she want me to do? What would she encourage me to do? And it's those conversations that I hold really dear, but that get me through the hard days as the parent that's going through this.
Yeah. You know, Mom sounds like she was a very wise woman because she nailed it spot on, Erica. Really, she did. Because the majority of the people that I've interviewed, they didn't have love for themselves, right? I mean, yeah, they dealt with some trauma and some, oh my gosh, I would be in the same shoes they had fallen in, right? If I had gone through probably what they've gone through.
Yeah.
Just knowing me, I know I would. Loving ourselves is so huge, right? Because and I know you know this now because of all the training and stuff that you've gone through. How can we expect ourselves to love another individual if we don't even have that love for ourselves? And almost in a way, looking at yourself as number one is really not a bad thing, because if we don't take care of self and deal with what we have to deal with, all we do is project that crap on someone else and not realize that's exactly what we're doing, right? Because we're always looking for that validation as well. A quick story where, you know, I really do work hard on watching my ego. I really don't want my ego to get in the way of my life like it has done the majority of my life, right? And I went to this seminar or this class my friend Curtis was holding, and he gave us some homework to do. And he wanted us to memorize these positive affirmation type things like I am wonderful and I am this and I am that and I can do whatever. And when he gave that to us, and he goes, go home and practice, and when you come back next week, I want to ask how everyone's doing. And my ego immediately spiked, and I went, I got this. I've been reading all these books, piece of flipping cake, right? And I go home, and part of this exercise is you had to look at yourself in the mirror. You had to look at yourself in the mirror. You just couldn't say them. You had to look at yourself in the mirror. And it took me probably about 3 days or so. And I realized as I was making these statements, these sayings, I wasn't looking at myself in the mirror. You having a coughing attack there? You have to get the water. So my ego was shot all to hell immediately because here I am thinking I've got this thing licked, and I realized I wasn't even look at myself in the mirror. So if I couldn't look at myself in the mirror and say these things, I realized I didn't believe them. That's why I wasn't looking at myself in the mirror. That's why I looked away every single time. And it's hard for all of us. I mean, going back to the forgiveness, when I did my fasting, because I didn't feel like I was getting answers, and I decided to fast. Hadn't fasted since I was probably 13. Called a buddy up, asked him how you do it, did it, and the word forgiveness kept coming up. And I remember being as spiritual as I am, going, Father, if you expect me to forgive her, absolutely not. No way. But it just kept pounding on me, just kept pounding on me. It's almost like that little teeny pebble that's in your shoe, and you take it off and you shake it and you put it back on. You're like, shit, it's still there. You shake it and it's still there. It took me a while to realize it wasn't her I was supposed to forgive. It was me. And once I got that figured out and started forgiving myself for all the things I did wrong, that's when things finally started changing. So, yeah, the forgiveness is huge. And if anything, people, if you don't want to forgive, don't forgive just to forgive the other person. Forgive for yourself, because that is so healing. Because if you don't, it will tear you up inside, and that could even lead people to addiction.
Yep. Well, and I think too, when you talk about forgiveness, even if you just start with acknowledgement, acknowledging your part, um, because I've said since the first time I came to investigate addiction and recovery and all the tools that are in our community to help individuals. I know I said to you, I was like, oh, I don't fit in this room, because it's not common for parents to be a part of addiction recovery. I remember a program my son going through recently. Mark and I show up for family night, and Mark's background, what my husband looks like. So for those that are listening, my husband's 6'7". He gets upset if I say 200 pounds soaking wet, because he's gained a few pounds and he's super excited about it, because he's not skinny anymore. But I remember us walking into this family night, and the individuals that are going through recovery, they all sit down, and there was some slang language, excuse me, as Mark would say, and the F word, every other word out of their mouth. And they get to us, and the therapist says, hey, you guys are new. Would you mind standing up and telling a little bit about yourself? And so Mark stands up, tells them what he does. And the look on their faces, Al, was like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't say the F word anymore. Oh my gosh, I shouldn't, do this, do that. And Mark stood standing, and he said, I don't want you to change who you are. I respect that you respect me. However, I've heard a lot worse, and I want you to stay true to who you are. And if you saying those words helps you on the road to recovery, keep saying them.
Yeah.
And afterwards, several of the men came up and said, we have heard so much about you guys. Riley talks about you on the daily. And several of them have stayed in touch with me, even though he's not in that program anymore. But they have said what an impact we had just that one night of being supportive of everyone in that room. And remembering that situation the first time that I walked into your networking opportunity and support group, and saying to you, I'm here with you. I don't know anyone else, and I don't know how long I'll stay.
Yeah.
But really, that night was like, okay, what else can I do to acknowledge what's going on in my home? What is happening to my son? What can I do to acknowledge? So I think sometimes, even if we acknowledge, and then, if forgiveness is the next step, or maybe it's not, for a few more steps down the road, but acknowledging, your part in it or your place in it, and then taking ownership for that and acting accordingly, and then, moving on to the next stage. I think that's an equal important as well, because like you said, even though I'm not the one, using drugs or alcohol, I'm still kind of going back to what Curtis challenged you to do. I don't call them words of affirmation either, Al. There's another, we call them confidence coaching in my house.
Uh-huh.
Because that's another weird word. Meditation, affirmation. Nope, they're not words that regularly come out of Erika's mouth.
Not
But
in
you
the
talk
Barney
about
house, eh?
confidence and stillness. Those are words that don't make me want to throw up.
Right.
And so, kind of piggybacking on what you said, it's important to acknowledge how well you're already doing. And Curtis got it right when he said, hey, I want you to give you this homework and I want you to do these things, because if we're not checking in with ourselves, how can we be supportive of our loved ones?
Yeah.
And then your addiction for you and I may be talking ill of ourselves, really getting down on ourselves. That can be an addiction to some people. It doesn't have to be a drug or alcohol,
Oh,
but
absolutely.
sometimes that's worse.
Yeah, agreed. I agree with that 100%, because it does just as much damage, bodily damage and mind damage, than a substance.
Yep.
I mean, it seriously does. It's like a cancer. It just sits and grows.
Yep.
Yeah. So we constantly need to work on ourselves. And I was sharing with somebody the other day that we just hit our 200th episode. It just came out on yesterday, actually on Thursday, on the 10th. And I was telling somebody that I know a lot more about addiction than I did 2 years ago. And he's like, really? And I says, yeah, it's about that much. And they're like, well, I thought you said you knew a lot. I'm like, I did. Before it was like this. Now it's like this, right? Because I haven't walked in those shoes. I mean, I had, my 8-year bout. It was a weekend, and some people that I know, like, you really wasn't an addict. Other people are like, oh yeah, you were definitely an addict, and but yeah, I don't understand it. I still don't. And doing these shows helped me a lot. And I'm sure, like going to support groups and things like that, they helped me a little bit when I went to them. It's crazy because all the support groups that I went to, every single one of them, I was the only one that had a spouse. Everyone else, and I remember even being in a room with like 30 people, and I would be the only one there that had a spouse. Everyone else had a child, whether it was a son or a daughter, which I found really crazy and odd. And I was speaking with another friend of mine, Diane. We were actually messaging each other this morning, and I was at the gym reaching out to her, and she heard me say on a show that I'm looking for more people who are on the other side, like yourself, right? And I don't get a lot of people knocking down my door. I have more of the people in long-term recovery coming to me and going, I want to tell my story, which is huge. And I love it because their story needs to be heard, because it helps people like us understand more, right? And she goes, why is that? Why is it that it's harder to get guests that are on the other side? And for me, I believe because the majority of them are parents that have a child like yourself, Erika, it's that shame and that judgment. And it's the judgment on them, right? Going back, was I a bad parent?
Yep.
Did I do wrong? What mistakes did I make? Oh, I guess I shouldn't have said this. You know, we should on ourselves, right? I shouldn't have done that, or I could have done this better. And I don't think they really want people to know. And for me, I'm a firm believer it's very important for us to talk about it, because if we don't, it can push us to an addiction, right? Whether it's work, shopping, phone, not paying attention to our family, right? Because we still have a husband or a wife to pay attention to. We still have other kids we got to give our attention to. There's so many other ways of addiction, just not drugs and alcohol, that it can push us into, because again, we're running away from our feelings. And that's one of the worst things we can do. And society, I believe, society has shaped us that way. We are not allowed to feel our feelings. God gave us these feelings for a freaking reason. The trick is not to stay there. Yeah. So it's a tough one for everyone, you know, and it's so easy for us to fall into the addiction with our loved ones. And people who've heard the show have heard me say this many times. I was addicted to my wife's addiction.
Yep.
And I told myself I would not ever do that again. I'd never do that again. I'm going to live my life, because I'm not going to be sneaking around to do everything I could to catch her, or none of that bull crap anymore, because it consumed my life, and I'm not doing it.
I think if I um if I had to acknowledge my place in my son's addiction, it would probably be the fixer. I still do on, excuse me, not as much now as I did want to a year ago, but I very much wanted to fix him. I wanted to make him better. Like, as a parent, I think sometimes we just like, why can't I just snap my fingers and he want it as bad as I do? And, like we've been talking today, you can thump him on the head. You can, try to knock some sense into him as you feel. But my acknowledgement, something, that I've sat still about quite a bit, especially in the last couple of months of, since his birthday and since the big overdose, worst yet. But just acknowledging that I couldn't fix him. And I didn't want that to be, if it were to go sideways and for me to get the phone call that they couldn't save him, did I want to be known as the fixer? And that ate me alive worse than any other experience I've experienced thus far. And
Wow.
so, like you said, it is a daily reminder of how can I be supportive and not fix it? And for someone who is imperfectly perfect, and a control freak, and acknowledge it, it's a daily, to do, so to speak, of, okay, you're not going to fix it today, Erika. You're just going to acknowledge that it's there. And what can you do to be supportive and not, and not jump into, the 10 checks that I could easily put on a checklist, and just be supportive. And sometimes that's harder than trying to fix it.
Yeah,
But it is something that you do have to acknowledge, for sure.
absolutely. You know, it's crazy that you use the word fix, because that is definitely a word Janan cannot stand. And a lot of other people in long-term recovery, right?
Yep.
Because they say they're not broken, right?
Yep.
They may have some missing pieces, right? That's in here, but they're not broken. Um, yeah, and again, too, it's we like to say in our household, stay on your side of the street. It's a
We say stop trying to get over to my side of the fence because it's not greener.
it's not greener. Yeah, if you jump on my side of the fence, you may land in something you don't want to land in.
Yep. We so many times just in life in general. Um, I I'm the oldest of three siblings, and there have been many times, especially in my son's recovery, excuse me, where my siblings think they know it all. They can step into my shoes at any given moment and they can completely become me. And there have been many times, Al, where I've said, we're not on the 50-yard line. You stay on your side of the football field and I'll stay on mine. And my sister will say, you mean I can't jump the fence and come over to the other side? And I'm like, it's not greener. I
Yeah.
promise you, the drama you think is going on in your life, stay there. It's good. It's really good. So yeah, we definitely determine why they think they want to come over to my side of the fence, because
Yeah.
there's sunshine and sprinkler systems and all the necessary most of the time on their side of the fence. But yet, you've talked about society, you've talked about what society wants you to believe. You get on social media for 10 minutes and your whole mind is blown. And you may or may not doubt who you are or what you're supposed to become just because of what society says is the status quo.
Yeah.
That is my siblings in a nutshell. That is, a lot of my friends that used to be my friends, they can't handle it. They're just like, you can cry and laugh in the same moment. And sometimes that's just part of what addiction is. That's part of what getting on the other side is realizing those emotions can be exactly that: laughter, joy, and tears all in the same moment.
Yeah.
Like, and it's like, why am I crying, but I'm laughing, but I'm happy, but I'm sad, all those things. And I'm like, welcome to my world.
Yeah. And
Stay on your side of the fence if you don't want any part of this.
that's exactly what it's like, though, right? I mean, seriously, it is. It's an emotional roller coaster.
Yeah.
Big time. And I would say to those who want to climb over that fence, it's like, you know what, this is my journey. This is my journey for me to go through. It's not your journey. You go through your journey.
Yeah.
It's my book. It's my chapter. I've got to read it till the end, or I got to decide whether I'm just going to burn the book, you know, and decide to go somewhere else.
Well, and I said, I gave you my absolute admiration. I look up to you so much, and you and I have shared that personally and over the years. But I will say, leading up to today, I've had some really great friends nudge me over the last couple of weeks and just still allow me to have my own choice to do it or not. But I've had several friends that have said, hey, I know you're going to be a guest on your friend's podcast. Have you thought about sharing your story, whether it's a book or, just a post on social media? Yeah, I really feel like there are some lives that could change in regards to this, or at least know that they're not alone.
Mhm.
And me, Alec, I'm a person who, as you affirmed me, I love smiles and hugs. I love creating joy and inspiring people. And so over the last couple of weeks, I've had many people, some really great friends, some friends I haven't seen in many, many years, but know bits and pieces of my story in regards to my son. And they dared me lovingly. They're like, if it's not a book, you at least need to start sharing that they're not alone. You know, whether it's, you know, anorexia or addiction or, you know, whatever it is. And so this past weekend, I made a post and I just shared some highlights of what my husband and I have been going through, from the financial responsibility that we have and the emotional responsibility that we feel like we have, and the spiritual aspect of it. And I have to say, you know, we've been talking about stay on your side of the fence. I had a family member reach out to me on Tuesday, which was my birthday. Didn't even ask me anything about my birthday, but proceeded to give me their opinion of my highlight story. And I just affirmed to them, I didn't tell the ugly. I'm not to the ugly part yet. I just wanted individuals to know, whatever it is that you're going through, I'm walking there with you.
Yeah.
Yes, my journey is my son's recovery. Yes, my son's, you know, addiction. It looks different for everybody. But I think there's something to relate to, you know, when you talked about how parents don't want to share their story. I hope those that are listening, I hope you're inspired to share your story, even if you just share a little bit.
Yeah.
I could have easily made book, you know, volume 1, chapter 1 of my book, maybe someday. I could have started with the ugly, because you, being my friend, know the ugly, especially the ugly that we've been dealing with the last 8 months. And I didn't go there. I wanted them to know where it began and where it is currently. And I knew he would have an opinion out. I knew he would have an opinion, but I didn't think it would be to the level that it was. And when I got off the phone, my husband said, "Do you think he thinks you called him out?" And I had to think about that. I was like, maybe he's going through something. You know, he's at a pivotal moment where one of his children just turned 12, and, you know, and maybe there's some things like, welcome to teenager world. Welcome to those things. But, you know, for those listeners out there, I hope that, you know, I hope you just dare to believe in yourself enough to just affirm that you're not okay when you're not okay. Because that's half the battle. As a
Agree.
parent, you want to be okay all the time because you want to be there for your kids 100%. And you want to show up the highest way you can. But when you can have that moment of saying, you know what, I'm not okay, and this is why, that is a step in the right direction as a parent, and allows you to help that person that you want to help so deeply.
Yeah. Well, like you said, that's a huge step, right? Again, to admit, because again, why don't we do that as
Yep.
individuals? And it's because we're not allowed to. We're not allowed to show our feelings, or we're looked at as weak, or we're
Yep.
looked at as being broken, right? That we have to be fixed, or there's something wrong with us. And hell, I've said this on the show and I'll say it again. There's something wrong with every single one of us.
Yep.
There ain't a one out there that, in my belief, again, this is just coming from how I feel, you don't walk on clouds all day long. You're going to step in a pile of shit. That's just how life is, right? And things are going to happen to you. And the reason why they happen to us is because that's how we learn. That's how we grow. That's how we become stronger as individuals. However, if we don't deal with the situation and we don't talk about it, we don't grow.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and two, sharing just those couple of paragraphs that I shared on my social media page, I picked one platform. I was like, I gotta take my own advice. I gotta take the baby step of throwing up literally. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Can I really hit the send button? But something that I realized in that moment, Al, was the individuals that reached out to me to say, you know, a number of things, mainly thank you. Thank you for sharing this little bit. And they said, you know, I'm sure that there are many more chapters. And I said, there are. And it led them to being equally vulnerable with me to share their addiction story. Individuals out in my wildest dreams was like, no way.
Yep,
And
lived
one
it.
of the little, I call her a little girl, because she could easily be mine, was like, I've been in addiction recovery for 8 years. And I'm like, you don't even look old enough to be legal. And she's like, you know, and several people, paragraphs, mini novels, if you will, of Erika, thank you so much. Erika, you know, what gave you permission was a lot of what God asked. When did you give yourself permission to do this? And I just said, you know what? I attended this event, and when that event was done, I knew my next step, and it was to start healing for myself and understanding me, and then be able to help others. And I never in my wildest dreams thought my next step might be helping those in addiction, whatever that is. But you know me, if I jump, I don't jump small. And it's still amazing to my husband. He's like, I never, never. And I'm like, I know. He's like, you ready to jump? I'm like, not yet. And then I ended up sharing, you know, a little part of my son's story. So, you know, it's all those people that have that superpower that you don't think you do, that encourage you to do things that become your superpower eventually.
Oh yeah. And you were so right. And this is just the start. I mean, seriously, Erica, it's the start. You know, almost the same thing happened to me, right? I
Yep.
kept it quiet, kept it hidden, sat down at High Point Coffee in West Jordan, had a cup of coffee with a friend, finally started opening up, and he's like, why aren't you talking about this? And I said,
Yep.
well, who the hell wants to hear it? And he goes, other people who are going through what you're going through. And on the way home, I got thinking about it. And I'm not going to say every one of us, but there's a lot of us who think this way. When we've got something going on in our life, we think we are the only ones.
Yep.
Well, newsflash, there are thousands of other people going through what you're going through, some less, some worse. However, they're still going through it. And the same thing happened to me. I would go to a networking group, an event, and people who I've known for 4, 5, 6, 7 years started coming up and going, hey, can I talk to you in private for a minute? It's like, yeah, sure. And would go off away from the crowd. And they're like, I don't know if you knew, but I used to be a heroin addict. And I'd be like, say what? I've known you for 7 years. No way. Oh, yeah, I've been in recovery for a long time, or I was an alcoholic. And it just kept growing. It got to where everywhere I went, and still to this day, everywhere I go, if I start talking with somebody, them themselves are in recovery, or they have a loved one, or they have a friend that's battling it. And I am not bullshitting when I say everywhere, because it is everywhere. When I started opening up, I started realizing this is a huge issue. I mean, it's like you can almost ask, I bet you if you ask 10 families if cancer's affected their life, I would say, and I'm just guessing here, right? I don't know the numbers, but I would guess either 7 or 8 out of those 10, cancer has touched their life in one way, right? Whether it's a family member, themselves, or whatever. Addiction, it's the same.
Yep.
It literally is the same. And it just, yeah, it blows my mind. I wear my t-shirt sometimes to the gym, and it's crazy. I'll have people come up and go, so are you in long-term addiction or recovery? And I'm like, well, I guess you can say I am. And I tell them a little bit of my story, tell them I'm doing the podcast, and they're going, yeah, I'm in recovery. Oh my gosh, seriously, right? And they start opening up and telling their stories. And it's because of what you did to help open up that other can. You're the one that's helping the whole recovery community, right? You're just not helping yourself. You're helping so many others, because these voices need to be heard. These stories need to be told, because especially here, I mean, I don't know what it's like in other states except for what some of my guests have said, and I've interviewed people from the UK and Canada and all over the United States. I know here, because of what the prominent religion is here, it's hush hush. You don't
Oh
talk
yeah.
about it, right? No, 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 absolutely. Nope, I don't want to hear anything about it. They're not doing themselves any good. It needs to be spoken.
Yeah.
I mean, our good friend who actually was the guest co-host on our first show, Janessa, Janessa got up in Sacrament and told her story of her husband's sex addiction. Holy cow. What a thing to throw out in the middle of Sacrament, right?
I've been there.
That is crazy.
We moved to our new house a year ago, and several people in my ward know that I'm also an international speaker. And so like, oh, it shouldn't even scare you to speak in sacrament meeting then. And I was like, I prefer to speak to people I don't know. And it just hit me one Sunday during testimony meeting. I was like, I'm going to go and share what happened this week. The story I just shared in regards to my husband and I going to family night with my son's addiction recovery. Afterwards, 3 moms came up to me and they're like, oh my gosh, my son was that same age. Oh my gosh, this and this and this. And this last week, our ward just split. And so we used to be a congregation of 1,000. We're like less than 300. But it's nice because people.
Mm-hmm.
We're standing in the chapel out for an hour after church ends. These 3 moms, they're like, Erika, tell me more. And we're having these amazing conversations. But to piggyback off something that you said earlier in regards to your jeans and flip-flops, I also remember the first time you ever showed up in cowboy boots and your jeans, and it was right after you'd been interviewed to share your story. And I remember our little inner circle, as you and I call it, our little intimate 10 friends of said event. And I remember the looks on our faces of like, because we knew your story with your wife, but we didn't know your story.
Yeah.
And then you sharing your story, and I was like, who knew Mr. Cowboy Boots had a whole nother amazing, inspirational side? It's perfect that you talk about the other side of addiction now, because so many times, like you've said today, parents, it is taboo because society says parents should be there for their kids no matter what. But something that I've realized just within the past couple of days is another way I can help my child is to share his story and my side of his story, because then I get a whole nother inner circle of individuals that can relate to my story and maybe give me tips and tricks that I can implement for myself so that I continue to heal and to forgive even more.
Absolutely. It's a healing process, right? I mean,
Yep.
healing that I've gone through in the last 2.5 years, it's amazing. And really, every one of my guests is teaching me something. I mean,
Yep.
seriously, I may have heard some of the same things over and over. However, it affected me in a different way, if that makes sense. And it's because it was their experience, right? It wasn't the other person who I interviewed last week that kind of told me the same thing. It seemed different to me. And it's so rewarding and so healing for all of us. That's why we need to share our stories. That's the importance of it, because our stories matter. And if we can help one person, just one,
Yeah.
that's all it's going to take, because it'll snowball. It will flip and snowball.
Yep.
And it's proof. So, Erica, gosh, we've been in this an hour already. It goes by so flipping fast, actually a little over an hour. Uh, what did you want our listeners to gain from the show today? Or at least what would be your main message?
To know that there is healing on the other side of forgiveness. When you are willing and acknowledge your God-given right to healing, not only forgiving yourself, but forgiving those individuals like my son, the opportunity to move forward fully because you forgive yourself for what you did or didn't do right. And I think there's power in that. And I think that the listeners that are listening to this, you're only as good to others as you are good to yourself. So be better at being good to yourself.
Love it. That is a wonderful message. Good stuff. Matt, I go back and look at the first time that we met, and even like with Janessa, who was on the show today, we have all grown so much in just the past 3 years. We've really take a whole new step in our life in the right direction, thank goodness, right? We don't want to go
Right.
backwards, we want to go forward. And it's so great. I mean, I was hearing some of the stuff Janessa was talking about this morning, on the earlier show, and I am just, oh my gosh, I was so impressed with her wording and how she's looking at things. And I go back to how all of us, when we first met and we were first chatting and different things, and we were in such a whole different realm at that time. And to see where we're at today, I mean, that ball of yarn has just gotten so huge, and it's so cool to see see us all grow. It's just amazing. Well, Erika, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and for the vulnerability and the willingness to come on and share your side and what life's been like for you and your family, and also, some of the opinions you've gotten from other people, because we are going to get them, that's for sure. But yeah, again, just thank you for taking time to spend it with me today. So greatly appreciated.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for being an example so that my story could begin. Because without you and without your example and what you're doing, individuals like myself may have stayed silent.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, guys, again, thank you to everyone. Again, as I've said on the show before many, many times, this is just a platform. It may be called AR, the other side of addiction. However, it's because of you that's making this possible. All our guest co-hosts, all our listeners, our sponsors, Resilience Talk Network, who really helped me started getting this thing rocking and rolling. I'm shocked that we've hit 200 episodes already. I'm just so flipping amazed. I was shocked when 100 hit. Now to have another 100 in the coffer, I'm just totally amazed. Guys, remember to mark your calendars for October 7th. It's a Saturday at the Miller Free Enterprise Building in Sandy from 1 to 6. Probably go till about 7, but we're going to say 1 to 6. We've got a really, really great event. It's our third Healing Utah Success Summit. We've got my good friend Mallory Roosh from St. George is going to be coming up and talking. My good buddy, who was actually our MC at our April event, Curtis Marsh, he is actually going to be speaking. And you definitely want to hear his story because his nickname was Chaos. So put Chaos and his past together. You definitely want to hear this story because you meet the guy now. He's the freaking biggest teddy bear you'll ever meet. Such a great man and a huge soul. Brad Neufeld, the owner of Resilience Talk Network, is going to be sharing some stuff. And I'm going to be speaking. Guys, you're not going to be hearing the same stories. We're all doing our best to keep shaking this thing up and adding different things. What I do want to add is I'm going to be reading a special letter. And every time I practice it, I cry. However, I did try it out at Red Barn, and for some reason I didn't cry, which was really weird because when I sit down and actually go over it, I start crying again. So we'll see what happens at the summit, but I've got a very special letter that I'm going to read to everyone. So again, thank you everyone, to all our sponsors, all you guys, all our listeners, our guests. We love the heck out of you. And remember, addiction is giving up everything for one thing, and recovery is giving up one thing for everything. We're out.